what you're about, what you're doing, and all those good things.
The organization that I get to be the executive director of is called More2 Metro Organization for Racial and Economic Equity. And what we are is a non-for-profit, faith-based community organizing group. And we're a member of the National Gamaliel Network of community organizing groups around the nation.
We are in quite a time right now, are we not? Going on in our country as the result of the recent death of George Floyd and many others of color. Tell us what your organization is doing and how you're involved in that whole narrative.
So, there's two pandemics going on right now, and one of them has been going on since the beginnings of our government in this nation, right? And that's the pandemic of systemic racism. And I would just say it's been exposed through the murder of George Floyd that we all saw on national news while we were in the midst of another pandemic. And so More Squared has been working in that space of police reform in both Kansas City, Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri, specifically since around 2014. I say around then, we had a member of More Squared, Brian Stokes, who's well known, who was a member of one of our congregations, who was killed by Kansas City Police Department prior to the Ferguson uprising. And we started looking at that situation and trying to find out what happened, and started working with his attorney, who's also been a member of a More Squared congregation, and just started taking a look, and being outraged with his family and his church members. And so that's when we started working in the realm of police reform. Specifically, what we do as a community organizing group is we train and develop people to be leaders to address racial inequity in their city. And so one of those prongs is certainly in the realm of criminal justice, and we spend a good measure of time on that already.
Take a deeper dive for us. When you say work in that area, tell us about, the boots on the ground things that you're doing and how you do them.
Uh-huh. So we had expressly started working on local control of Kansas City Police Department we declared publicly that we wanted to pursue local control of the Kansas City Police Department back in April of 2018. And a lot of people largely don't know that ours in Kansas City, Missouri, it's the only police department in the nation that is controlled not by the citizens and not by the people we elect, but actually by the governor of our state appointing a board. And largely not a board that really makes any decisions that impact police reform as far as the meetings that we were attending and we could tell. And so we had gotten to that place in 2018 because we were seeing an increased number of alarming shootings and started seeing a pattern about what was happening in Kansas City. And I would say the public largely doesn't know, and that was a part of it. So some of our work has been screaming about it from rooftops, trying to organize people into spaces where they could learn. That kickoff event that we had where we publicly declared that it is a problem here in Kansas City, and it included families like Ryan Stokes and Dante Franklin's family, and attorneys who represent repeated police brutality cases in our city. And we called that event, "It Happens Here Too." And I would say that that message largely was aimed at Caucasian members of our congregations, because African American members have been telling us this all along, right? And so for us, some of the work has just been kind of pulling back the curtain, trying to explain what we believe is happening, which is our police department releases a statement that suggests that something perhaps more dangerous and more violent was occurring in the streets than what we believe once we see the depositions and once we see the civil lawsuits or whatever comes out. after the fact. And so there is nobody paying constant attention to this. I shouldn't say nobody. There are some important groups, like One Struggle KC has been there even longer than we have. Yet not enough people are paying attention. Not enough people are paying attention to what happens. And so a huge part of our work has been trying to move that conversation into our congregations. And when we see people hang, a Black Lives Matter banner on their church, saying to them, do you know that this is happening here in this community? And then bringing more and more people into that, and talking about what are the real solutions. So some of the real solutions we started talking about, like body cams and civilian review boards. And as we started to do as we do and meet individually with the Board of Police Commission members and then Mayor Sly James and others, it became more and more apparent that the Board of Police Commission structure really is not designed for citizens like us to pursue change through that structure. And so to get even those small changes made, we felt we needed to first figure out how to govern our own police department here in the city. And so we started that pursuit because of that. And that's just what we do on the Missouri side in
Well,
criminal
let's talk
justice.
about, well, before we leave this topic, though, I want you to share with our listeners kind of the makeup of the organization. When you say congregations, who's at the table with you all?
Yeah, so there are 34 member congregations that are a part of More Squared. They are Jewish, Unitarian, and Christian. Anyone is welcome in terms of membership. We see ourselves as an interfaith and a faith-based organization that organizes around shared values like the common good and looking out for our fellow human beings. So anyone's welcome at the table. We have a couple of nonprofits that are members, like AIR, Advocates for Immigrant Rights and Reconciliation, but we're primarily set up for non-for-profit institutions to join us. And then we added, about 5 years ago, we added a component called individual members. And so those individual members are people who are dedicated to the work. They invest $10 a month in our work, either of their own money or a donor can sponsor them. And those individual members have been a really quickly growing body. They're headed right now by Lisa Benson Cooper, who people know locally. She's a local reporter who's
Right.
quite well known. And so Lisa's our individual caucus chair, and she's really extraordinary and just a huge advocate. So we is a big we. It's basically whoever comes to the table when decisions are made. They're primarily made by members, but they're made by members through lots and lots of conversations, and we consider our members to be any of those individual people as well as anybody who's a part of those 34 institutions.
Has your phone been ringing off the hook, or your social media and your Facebook in these last few weeks as we've seen things develop around the country?
Yes, so if anyone's heard me be a little curt with them, Ruth, please understand it's because time is of the essence. I'm working 20 hours a day right now, and I made a promise to somebody who cares about that. I would sleep that. So I plan on pulling off a little early today, but it truly is, it's a moment that we've got to harness into a lasting movement. And I don't want to take credit for this moment. It's a horrible thing that set this off, right? But we know that the murder of Emmett Till set off the civil rights movement. And if we don't harness all of this energy coming our way right now, we may not use this movement to stop, what's been happening and create lasting change in our communities. So I'm willing to sacrifice sleep. It's the least I can do as a white lady who gets to run a racial justice organization. It's the least I could do, right? And the messages are coming at me through Facebook and text and email and phone, and it's pretty nonstop. But there's real beauty. You know, people are also donating who I don't know them and they don't know me. And, you know, there's some real beauty that's come um, out of this moment as well.
Well, since we talk about engagement, how can folks, connect with you, and what kinds of things as volunteers might they be engaged in?
Yeah. So anybody who works with us, we call them a leader. You're not a volunteer if you're doing our work. You're doing leadership work, and so leaders can come to us however they like. The easiest way is to maybe fill out the contact form on our website, which is just more2 more number 2.org. That's more squared, but exponents and that doesn't work right. So moresquared.org, more2.org, and you can go and find the contact form and just put your email in there. And then you don't have to be a member. You can come to anything you like. We have right now, we're doing some sort of rally or public action. We use those terms instead of protest. We're doing a rally or public action probably every other day in Kansas City, Kansas right now. People can follow us on Facebook and see those things. We have monthly issues nights where we take on all of our task forces, work on their various issue cuts, public policy goals. That's what our issue cuts are, right? So our education task force has a public policy goal of reducing, if not banning, out of school suspension, because Missouri has the worst out of school suspension for brown and black children in the nation, and so it's education, criminal justice, workforce. We work on transportation, and then access to health, where we're working on Medicaid expansion. And those are just like the Missouri task forces. So,
So you're working on both sides of the state line, obviously,
yes.
and criminal justice and this whole racial is very, of course, is very huge. It's part of your title. Let's talk about some of the other, I guess, I hate to call it sexy, but less front in headlines and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's so varied, and I think I sound like I'm making things up when I tell you all the things I'm doing, but truly I'm not doing them. It's more squared and we're big, right? And so this morning I started my day with an impromptu television interview about some of this stuff around policing in Kansas City, Kansas. And then went straight into what we call the Bob's Call. The Bob's Call is Black-owned businesses, and we have restaurants that are Black-owned that we've been organizing because we're in pursuit of more city contracts for them. And so we've been organizing Black-owned restaurants in Kansas City for about 6 months, and guess what happened? Coronavirus, and turns out they needed the Bob's Call more than ever, because we could tap them into people like Nia at the City Biz Center, and she could give information about how to access the recovery funds that were largely denied to African American businesses, both locally and throughout the nation. And Nia could help the business owners get access. So right now, we're working with the Bobs to do a number of different things, from self-promotion and marketing to we've got a new app that was gifted to us called the Black Map, and it actually identifies Black-owned businesses, restaurants near you and all throughout the metro. And so just like a number of different things have sprung from that Bob's Call that are just really exciting. And about midday, I had a fundraiser committee, and we're completely retooling our annual fundraiser, and we're having 100 house parties in one night, and having our keynote speaker broadcast live through people's televisions and things like that. So just,
That's amazing.
yeah, that's this
Wow.
morning what we did. And
How do you put that together when you say 100 houses? How's that working? Or is it too early to give us details?
We've gotten far enough along in the conceptualization, I think, of this route to tell you that we think we're going to use just one of the Bobs that has a couple of restaurants, and people will place an order for how many meals. And guess what? COVID-19 prepared all of us for this. We know how to do drive up, and they'll get not just meals, but entire house party kits. And so they have to order through that restaurant. I won't say their name yet because they're not yet in contract, but they'll order through that restaurant and they'll pick up their house party kit, and that will include decor and their party favors from us and their our program book, and then they'll have some kind of a link to watch it with their house party. So if it's 10 people in your driveway, or just hey, we have a lot of people in our base who are over 60 and in high risk categories, so maybe it's just you at home with your immediate family and you get to participate in our fundraiser. We didn't want to take that away from people. So
That's so
normally
exciting and very creative.
well, I think so. We're really good at creative at More Squared. We have a lot of
Well,
people who are good at that.
let's talk a little bit about the challenges when you are a basically one staff for a very busy,
No, I'm not.
or more than you.
No, there's three of us now, so it took a while. I was only staff for a while, but
Hooray!
we have Gary Enrique Bradley Lopez, who's our Missouri side organizer, and he works exclusively on access to health, so Medicaid expansion, and now COVID-19 issues. And then Marcus Wynn is the full-time Kansas organizer, and he's been with us about coming up on his third year. So
I stand corrected, but it is a small staff for very big issues and policy that you're tackling. Can you share maybe some best practice or tips on how you make that work?
yeah, I mean, I try to not touch things more than once. I learned that from some kind of an organizational lady on Oprah one time. She talked about how to sort your mail and all this stuff, and never touch a piece of mail more than once. So once I get an email, I've got to take care of it and get it off my desk if I can. And it's true with the issues. If somebody says, "Hey, you ought to work on this," I quickly say, "You know what? I I don't make these decisions. I need you to meet with so and so, and I broker the meeting. And so that's what a good organizer does. Even as the executive director, I'm not the person making the day-to-day decisions about what we do. It's the people who are dedicated to that issue. Um, I do have a good mind for strategy, and I like it when they ask about that. And but everything's done through, we have a lot of meetings. We build relationships, very intentional relationships, and try to explore people's self-interest and their gifts and talents, and then just broker around that uh, to create kind of task forces and people willing to work together. So it truly is not the staff of three; it's the army that we've built of leaders in all of these congregations that just really care about the issues.
Having worked in some faith circles, I know sometimes there are challenges when you bring different theological and background to the table. How do you manage that?
Um, you know, it's fascinating, right? Because there are challenges about um, things like LGBT issues often comes to mind, or whether women should lead in certain places like that. What we traditionally have done as an organization is stay focused on where we're united. And yet, as a change agent in the community, I always suggest that we've got to first look at changing ourselves individually, and then change our immediate circle. So that might be your congregation or your family. And then we change our organization. We've got no business trying to poke around what they're doing at the police department if we're not also always trying to make More Squared the best we can be, right? And so that's kind of a fundamental philosophy that we operate with, is trying to be on the inside who we say we are on the outside. And it's an ongoing challenge. But yeah, we do most of it through relationships and just encourage people to talk. If a pastor came to me, or maybe a rabbi comes to me and says, "You are really Jesus focused." Well, I'm not necessarily really Jesus focused, but the organization sounds that way today. So who do we need to talk with? and it's not just me. So it's always me encouraging and others encouraging people to have those deep discussions and figure it out, and we're people who are about the common good. So ultimately, we usually can reconcile some difficult situations.
I wanted to go back to one of the areas that you work in, and that's healthcare access and advocacy along those lines. How do you go about that? There's such bureaucracy built in systems. So how do you tackle that?
So our to be very specific, our access to health goal has always been about people being able to get healthcare more generally. And so, right, we participated in coalition with the Move Collaborative, the Missouri Organizing Collaborative, to get Medicaid expansion on the ballot. Um, Big shout out to our funder, Health Forward Foundation, has funded Gary's position with us to continue to work on that. And so we're calling voters. And you know what? COVID-19 has exposed the real truth that these 230,000 working Missourians deserve health care. They deserve to be able to show up at a hospital and be served, and deserve to have insurance that helps them pay for prescriptions. And it's really the essential workers who we're seeing most at risk right now. And so we just look for that on the August 4th ballot. It's an issue that More Squared's been promoting, and it'll be on the August 4th ballot in Missouri. So if you're so inclined, and believe people should have health care, there's your opportunity to engage.
What's the biggest challenge that you face as a nonprofit leader in running your organization?
Honestly, it'll sound trite, but it's hard for me to use certain forms of technology. I mean,
You're not alone.
yeah, and I'm not even 50 yet, right? So it's silly things, like, oh my gosh, the printer broke and I'm a staff of one and I've got to figure this out before the grant is due or something. Those are the things with people. I love people so much. So those challenges usually get worked through pretty well.
This seems very personal for you, something in your soul meant to do this work. Would you be willing to share a little bit why it is so personal for you and important? Maybe that's the better way to ask it.
Yeah, no, personal's real. That's very true. I'll tell you just, what I talk about especially with the criminal justice piece. A thing happened to me when I was growing up. We had some struggles for sure, right? And that set me on the path of becoming a social worker. So quickly, I had asked to do my practicum in a Missouri prison, my internship in a Missouri prison. And so I was assigned to Boonville Correctional Facility. And what they had me doing as an unpaid 21-year-old intern in Boonville Prison was deciding whether people should get out of prison or not. And there's this thing in Missouri called shock incarceration. And so they will say you get a 7-year sentence or you get a 5-year sentence, but you can go through this program for 120 days. The judge says this, and then if you do well in the program, I will let you out. Well, I was an unpaid intern writing reports to the judge saying whether people should get out of prison or not. And I knew that was serious. Like, I remember asking the people, should I really be doing this? Like, I'm 21. What do I know? But I was doing it, and one day I was sitting across from a guy from Kansas City, and I grew up in rural Cass County, so I just say I'm from Kansas City too. I always identify with Kansas City, and I was making this decision for his life, and I saw in the file that he and I were both born in 1973. We were both 21 at that time. He was African American man, and I'm a Caucasian woman. His mom and my mom both had the same name, the same first and middle name, actually. And I just remember thinking as I saw that in his chart before I met with him, oh, that's a coincidence. Oh, isn't that interesting? And then as he started telling me his story, Ruth, he told me things like that his parents had separated and his dad was they didn't know where he was for a while. And that happened in my life. I felt really abandoned growing up. He told me that his mom usually had to work multiple jobs to keep food on the table. And during that time, he started kind of acting out and running out of his anger, and spending more time in the streets. I spent more time on gravel roads, but I spent more time running around and doing things that definitely were criminal, right? And I remember in that moment his mom was a nurse's aide and my mom was, and his dad did construction. Like he told me his entire story was my story. And I started flipping through his case file just with complete confidence that he had done something heinous that I hadn't done. And when I realized that everything he had done, that I got to go home, like, contact with law enforcement and they'd say, go home, he had to go to jail. And here I was, like, making his decision for him. And so I remember that day telling myself, I've got to do something about this because I've got to be able to live with myself. And this isn't how I signed up to be a helping professional. And so, as social workers, we enter often by way of micro kind of work. And thank God we found this macro work in my path, which was community organizing. And really, I eventually learned it wasn't my job to save anybody. It's my job to liberate myself from being the oppressor. And it's my job to work and link arms with people like that gentleman when I encounter and meet people like that, whether they're in our churches or just amongst people in the community, and maybe co-conspire with them in a less criminal way than we used to.
That's a pretty cool story. What passion and gosh, we salute you for that and thanks for what you're doing. Again, if folks want to find out more, it's MORE, the number 2.org. Laura, thank you so much. And we want to thank you for listening to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We are produced by Charitable Communications, and we thank so much our main sponsor and underwriter, Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. To be a guest on KC Cares or underwriting opportunities, you can check us out at our website at kccaresonline.org. You can spread the love and find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for listening to KC Cares.